Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and I am graciously taking time away from Dragon Age the Veilguard to be here. So, no funny banter. Let's get right into it because I would really like to get back to playing Dragon Age the Veilguard, please. Also, hi, I have a new microphone.
It sounds good.
It sounds different. I've done some testing with it, but I want to see what it looks like in the episode. I'm very curious how this is going to sound, but I completely changed my whole setup in preparation for something. I got a new webcam, new microphone. The new chair was unrelated. I needed a new chair for my back problems. Because I'm in my 30s now, Bradley. And when you enter your 30s, your body starts to shut down.
Doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't work like it used to anymore.
Oof, Japan's gonna be rough on my body.
Yep. You're gonna be sitting on that plane for however many hours. 14 hours.
Yeah, I got the direct flight. I was like, ooh, it's gonna be
You
fun.
are insane. We are flying direct to, I believe, but I think ours is only like 7 hours.
Okay, well, that's not too bad, but because you're in California, so
That's
you don't
because
have
I'm
to
in California.
traverse the entire United States first before you get to Japan.
Correct. Before we get into today's episode, I just have something I want to talk about. I promise I'm not going to do this every single time, but we have been getting a higher degree of engagement on social media than we normally do with our posts. And I do want to say, if you are just joining us for the Acolyte, welcome. Thank you for listening. I liked the show. I am going to be as fair to the show as I possibly can while discussing it. But thank you for joining us on this journey. I did want to bring up one discussion that was had in our TikTok comment section, or specifically a comment. I didn't write down who it was, but somebody was like, the TikTok clip that Bradley picked, which was almost like tailor-made to get people commenting on it. So well done, Bradley. Was the bit where I'm talking about how the show is a mystery show. And there was a comment thread that was discussing whether or not the show was a murder mystery, right? So was the show a murder mystery because it told us who the murderer was of Indara in the first scene? Like we know who it is, right? I want to point out, I think it is a murder mystery, but I don't think it's the murder mystery that people thought it was when they started watching the show. Hear me out, Bradley. I think that it's a murder mystery for the witches on Brindok, and they stealth that in there without us noticing. Like, obviously, Indara dies at the beginning, but they make a point in episode 1 to bring up the witches on Brindok, Osha's family, a lot, and that May killed them. And then we find out in episode 3 that that's not necessarily the case. And so we then spend 4 episodes asking what the fuck happened to them before we figure out who actually did it. So I think the murder mystery here, at least in terms of that specific murder mystery, is the witches on Brindok. Now, there are bigger mysteries at play, but I think if you want to look at this as a murder mystery, you can look at this as a murder mystery for the witches, not for Indara. What are we talking about today, Bradley?
Today we're talking about the Acolyte, Episode 2, Revenge/Justice. An assassin strikes again, but this time the Jedi are here to attempt a capture. Charles, there's one thing you liked and one thing you didn't like about this episode.
So the one thing I liked, I'm going to steal from my own notes here. One thing that I liked that I wanted to bring up is the contained nature of the episode. And it may not feel that way, and you may not necessarily notice it, but a lot of the episode is contained to the Jedi Temple on Olega, the street outside, and the apothecary shop. And it's this kind of little area of street that they're all in. And because they're in this one tiny area, they have really filled up this area with a lot of vibrancy and life. We're not trying to hop around to 13 different places. This is very contained in one area, which feels very TV, and I like it a lot. But also, they've made it really cool, and you can feel the physical space in it. The scene where they're up on the balcony looking down over the apothecary shop, and it's clear that they're actually on the balcony looking down over the apothecary shop. I loved that a lot. One thing I disliked, Torben's makeup. You cannot convince me with that Dean Charles Chapman is like supposed to be I don't know how old he's supposed to be in this. He's supposed to be 26 or something in this. But I don't know what it is about the hair and beard thing that they gave him. It just didn't really work for me. It just didn't do it for me. I don't know why, but honestly, that's a hell of a nitpick because I really couldn't think of a lot else that I disliked about this episode. Bradley, what about you? One thing you liked and one thing you did not.
So the one thing that I liked was actually kind of a double-edged sword because I actually kind of also didn't like it, which is really funny how I liked and did not like the same thing. I liked how they use the classic Star Wars wipes this episode. I just love I love anytime Star Wars uses a wipe. There's something about it. It just feels very classical film. My problem with it though was I felt like it was overused. The problem was they would use it for like transition of time instead of transition of location, which I don't necessarily think was necessary, right? Like I don't think I think the average viewer will know that yeah, we're waiting until later tonight to go to the apothecary thing. Or like I don't know, there was just something there where I was like, we only need to use the wipes for passage of location. I don't think we need to use them for passage of time in the same space. Like it's just something that it doesn't need to be used. It's an editing choice. I don't understand it. I'm sure there's a reason, and I'm sure somebody like came up with a reason for it in the studio kind of thing. But I just, for me, not necessary. I still like wipes. Please use them. Just use them appropriately. The thing I did not like was also Torben's old man makeup. I absolutely hated it. It makes no sense. There's absolutely no reason why he needed to be an old man. Only what 6, 7 years have passed since the time, or
Oh,
what is it?
16. Sorry, my bad.
Okay, 16.
He's supposed to be yeah,
He's
he's
supposed to be
supposed
like
to
in
be
his
like 30 something.
30 something. But I'm like, if that's what I look like at 30, here's my problem. They didn't have to do him dirty with the hairline.
That I think that's the number
I
one
think
thing that
that's
did it for
really all
me.
it comes down to is the hair. Because I
And
think if you had just done him with regular hair, like even his same hair, like take off his Padawan braid, have him have the mullet hair or whatever. But the hairline, why the fuck was it receding all? Like, why does he have a 7 foot like hairline recede? I don't get it.
and look, I can already hear Chris from Darkside Divas in the background pointing out to me that people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones with my giant ass forehead. But I'm just saying the hair and makeup and all that for him, it's not badly executed. Like it's good. It's technically good. It's the initial design of it that I'm just like, what
Yeah.
the fuck is going
Well,
on?
I think it's also distracting, right? Like
Yes.
it actually takes you out of the story because it's so distracting. I think like when we get the flashbacks with Torben when he's younger, I mean, I know that's what Dean looks like. That's what he looks like. Like I
And
know
Dean
that's what he
Charles
looks
Chapman is like 26 or 27 or
He's like
something.
a
Like
young,
he
very
is
young
not a
person.
teenager.
No. And so I can believe that if you just change his hair slightly and add the old not you don't even have to add wrinkles or old man makeup. Like I'll still believe he's more of an adult. Like you don't have to do this to us. I hate when people do this in TV shows where they add old people makeup to the characters to be like, "Oh, look, they're older, but they're clearly the same 20-year-old playing the old version." Like don't they did that I know you hate this, but they did that in Harry Potter and it made them look fucking stupid at the end because they were like, why do they have wrinkles? They're not that much older. Like,
Shout out to my boy Sam Winchester. You absolutely did not deserve that shit. After all you went through, you did not deserve that old man makeup. Yeah, there was a period of time where they were doing it like for people, and then there was a period where they were trying to do like the digital aging and de-aging. And like the way that they handle like Sol and Indara, the way that they look younger in the flashback, and they aren't really changing anything. It's just the choices that they make. I think the choice they made with Torben in this, with his design of his older, like facial features, I think it just didn't work for me. But we have to talk about the episode.
Section 1. We begin on the planet Olega at the Jedi Temple. Outside, a young street urchin distracts a gatekeeper droid so May can plant a slicer device on the droid to hack it and open the gate. May navigates the temple's halls and eventually reaches a chamber where a meditating Jedi, Master Torben, sits. She confronts him and challenges him to a fight. However, she realizes he's encased in an invisible force field, immune to her attacks. Unable to break through, May hides as the temple has detected an intruder.
The planet Olega is new. We have not seen it before. This episode is the first time we're really going to see it and the only time we're really going to see it. Anyway, let's talk about the little Jabba droid.
Oh,
That's what I have. That's what I wrote down
droid.
in my notes. The little gate droid.
I love it.
I absolutely love those droids, and I am so glad to see one here.
I love when you have a Ring doorbell droid at any point in time.
Look. A
Great.
lot of people who work in tech, and especially people who work at NASA, are nerds. So a lot of times they will see a thing in a science fiction, and then the thing will become reality decades later.
I don't see why it couldn't. I mean, the only thing about Star Wars gate droids, I think they're all very physical, right? So it's like something that comes out of the wall to talk to you and to analyze you and do something, and then it retracts back into the wall. If we were gonna like incorporate this into like our modern society, it's probably gonna end up just being a screen. We're probably gonna get into that phase of like it's an emoji greeting you at the door. It's
Oh,
a celebrity
Christ.
AI thing greeting you at the door.
Christ.
Like I can see it happening, unfortunately. But
Oh, for 100%. I can absolutely see that happening. It makes me desperately want that to be 100 years from now when I don't have to be around to see it.
exactly, that would be ideal.
I did have a question about the subtitles, and this was just for me, for my own purposes. I don't remember there being the alien speech being subtitled the first time I watched this.
Oh,
And
was
yet,
it for you?
it was for me.
Maybe I just didn't pay attention. I don't think I saw that.
Yeah, because the first time I watched it, I'd have to test. This is a thing I didn't check, but I'd have to test to see because I watch it without subtitles when I watch it for the first time. And then when I go back to take my notes, I watch it for the subtitles so I can get all the proper spellings and everything done, right? I don't remember the alien speech here or at the end being subtitled the first time I watched it.
Mm.
And here it's subtitled and it looks hard baked into
So it's hard coded
the
in.
show. Like it looks like it's part of it. It doesn't look like it's the subtitles that's generated at the bottom. So my question, I guess, audience, give me feedback. When you watch this show, do you remember the alien speech being subtitled?
For some reason I have the memory of it not being subtitled.
I have the same memory, so I don't know if there's a thing where the alien speech is only translated when you turn the subtitles on.
But also, it's not really relevant to the story, right?
No,
Like,
I understood the episode perfectly fine the first time I watched it.
my thing with the hard-coded subtitles is we only need them in Star Wars if it's like actually pertinent to the plot or the story that's happening in front of us.
Yeah.
I.e., aliens talking to each other about a plot happening. Like,
Or Jabba
aliens in
the
the
Hutt.
background don't need it. You what?
When or Jabba the Hutt when he
Right.
has to speak to Luke in Return of the Jedi.
Sure. Yeah, stuff like that. Like I think only when they need we need to know what they're saying. If we don't need to know that, like obviously two aliens having a conversation about a character in front of them, like making fun of them or like arguing about them or something like that. Like if it's not pertinent to the actual plot, we don't necessarily need to know what they're saying. It's kind of funnier actually if you don't, because you're like,
Right.
oh, they're saying shit about him or something. Like, stuff like that. Like that's
It's
always
not
good.
a very interesting conversation when you do get to see what it actually says.
Exactly. So that was interesting for sure.
I want to talk about the two instances we've seen of May using people who are downtrodden to her advantage. In episode 1, she finds out where Indara is because she bribes a street beggar to tell her where Indara is. And in this episode, we see her actively pay off what looks like some sort of street urchin to get the gate droid to come out so that May can destroy the gate and enter the temple. May uses the underprivileged a lot in order to further her own ends. And they are people that the Jedi are overlooking. There are people who are deliberately disenfranchised, who are being used by this dark power to commit violence. I'm just saying it's an interesting story choice to look at.
I know. I actually kind of like that because I think the central theme of this show, or at least one of the central themes, is that the Jedi are not all good, right? They're not always the ones there to help all the time. And they do disenfranchise people by being like, well, we couldn't help you. We were helping somebody over here, or we were doing something else over here.
It's very I didn't come here to free slaves, Anakin.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing that this show where I think a lot of people have missed kind of what the show is doing is that it is trying to set up the institutional flaws in the Jedi Order that are eventually going to lead to the Phantom Menace and then the rise of the Empire. So we're already seeing those flaws inherent in the system this early on, but there's nobody around to really take advantage of them. And also, in a lot of ways, the Jedi are doing good things for the galaxy. Like whether or not they are a positive or negative force is something that's debated within the show itself. So it doesn't want to necessarily, I think, come down on one side or the other. But it is interesting to me that the enemies of the Jedi find their allies not in people who are powerful, who may see the Jedi as, a rival or a check on their power, but using people who are overlooked by the Jedi, either because the Jedi don't have resources or because they have other bigger things that they think they need to focus on. Anyway, let's talk about Torben. Very confusingly
Yes.
named Torben.
Would you like to know who's playing Torben?
I would love to know who's playing not Buckets of Blood.
Okay.
Because I saw it was like StarWars.com or something that first revealed his name. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Really? This is going to get so confusing. Because 100 years before this, there was a fucking, what is Masamita? Starts with a C. I need to look it up, otherwise it will bother me. A Shagrian. There is a Shagrian Jedi named Torben Buck who goes by Buckets of Blood, and his name is also Torben. The Buckets of Blood things make sense. I promise when we get to the High Republic, I will make you understand why he's called that.
Okay.
But anyway, tell me about who's playing the less fun Torben.
Dean Charles Chapman is playing Torben, who is best known for playing Tommen Baratheon in HBO's Game of Thrones. So he's definitely stepping up his game, trying to, get on some new shows. We see you working, Dean. Proud of you. So yeah, that's who's playing Master Torben. However, this is where it gets very interesting. Okay, so on Wikipedia. This is just Wikipedia. This is not anywhere else. I'm sure it says it on IMDb. On Wikipedia, Dean is not listed in the cast for this episode. I don't know why. I double checked it because I was like, am I missing this? Like, am I the problem?
It may just be an oversight on Wikipedia's part.
It has to be because I don't know. It just doesn't really make any sense. But also in the episode itself, I don't think there is a link to Torben's page. So, which is also weird because you know how they always highlight people's names and you can click and go to their there's like a section about him in the episode or whatever, but there's no link to Torben's page. So I'm wondering if he's been erased for some reason on Wikipedia. I don't understand why, but
there's an anti-Torben agenda.
There's something wrong here. Well, I think it also goes back to, remember when the show was first coming out, when we had just the trailer, and I think you're right, StarWars.com revealed his name is Torben, or maybe it was Master Torben or whatever it was. And people were like, that's weird because in the trailers, he's a Padawan, but he's called Master Torben. So why is he called Master Torben if he's a Padawan in the trailers only? It was this whole discourse over why he was a child, but he was called Master or whatever. And it's obviously he's an adult here in the scene. So I guess they were trying not to spoil certain things, but I just thought that was really weird and interesting that there's all this discourse around this character for no reason, and I don't know why.
Because Star Wars fans are going to discourse, as we will figure out when we get to episode 4. Star Wars fans going to discourse.
Okay. You know what? Let's let them, I guess.
We are going to let them, and we are not going to acknowledge that beyond what I have to on this show.
Section 2. On the snowy planet Karlak, Osha wakes to find Jeki trying to fix their ship. Master Sol and Yord discuss Osha's involvement in the murder. While Yord suspects her, Sol believes her innocence, suggesting instead that her twin sister may be responsible. Sol contacts Master Vernestra and updates her, explaining his belief that May has resurfaced after 16 years and is likely the one who killed Master Andara. Vernestra seems to agree and confirms a suspect matching Osha's description broke into the Olega Jedi Temple while Osha was already in custody. So she instructs Sol to investigate the break-in on Olega, taking Osha along as an asset.
I thought it was funny how Jackie was like, I thought only R2 units did outer ship work. I was like,
Which
oh, ha ha ha, I see
technically
what
is
you
true.
did here. Technically, they're supposed to.
Right.
Anyway, Osha then makes a comment about how she's more flexible, and I'm like, Osha,
Um,
are
what?
are
Excuse
you
me?
flirting with Sol's new Padawan?
You said something last week to me, and I can't remember what you said. You said something about Jackie, and we didn't put it in the episode last week because we were talking just casual. And then
It
this
is
scene
that
happened,
it
and I
is
was like,
that
what the fuck?
yeah, it is that Daphne Keene had said that she played Jackie as having a crush on Osha, and watching this scene, I'm like, I can see why.
Yes, I love it.
I can see why.
My
I
head canon immediately goes to that now. Like, I
I don't
love
think
it.
you have to headcanon. I think that's something the actor explicitly said was in her performance. But yeah, watching this scene, like, you can definitely
No, for sure.
tell like where that came from. I want to talk about the conversation between Sol and Yord really quick. Specifically, one line I want to call out because Yord is basically like, "Why the fuck are we letting Osha anywhere near this?" Which again, Yord is kind of right here
Poor Yord.
to
He
be
is
like,
literally the only one.
what?
Why is he always the
And then
actually funny enough, him and Jackie are the only ones who have like the most like level thinking process throughout this whole entire show. Like they're the only ones who genuinely
yes,
like exemplify like the actual right things
it's
to do.
good. It's good that Yort and Jackie are around to temper some of the other characters' more extreme tendencies.
Yes.
Anyway, Sol then says, and I'm quoting here, don't let fear affect your judgment. Okay, Sol, we'll come back to that.
Yeah. That's an interesting take for
We'll
him to
we'll come back to that, Sol. We'll come back to you telling Yord not to let fear affect his judgment.
which I want to push back a little bit on it because it's like, I don't think Yord is being quote unquote fearful, right? When he says things like this, where he's like, we shouldn't let her do this, it's because she's a suspect in a murder case. He's not being fearful for just the sake of being
And
fearful. Like,
and even though like they had removed, I think it's the next scene that he talks to Vernestra.
yeah.
Or it was the scene before that he talks to Vernestra. Either way, I think Osha has been removed as a suspect at this point, but either still, Yord has reason to be apprehensive of Osha.
Well, yeah, because technically, until he talks to Vernestra, she's still considered a suspect. So what Sol is saying, because he does talk to Yord before he talks to Vernestra. So,
Really? Because I thought he said, I gotta look up the episode. This is
well, what
this is
happens?
actually so important to my point that I have to literally look up the episode and find out. So
No,
the
so what he does is he gives his Sol gives his theory that it's May, that she could still be alive. He doesn't know for a fact. Then Vernestra confirms this fact because she says a suspect was found on Olega or whatever that looks like Osha that did the crime or is attempting to do a crime. So that's the order of events
You
there.
are
So
absolutely right.
yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And then they have another conversation about it.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and so even in that case, Yord has no reason not to suspect Osha.
No
Now
reason
we will
whatsoever.
see he continues to be suspicious of Osha after
Which
this.
okay, I'll give it to him in the beginning, right? Like up until this point, he's correct. He should be very suspicious. Once she's pretty much cleared of suspicion, essentially, or at least assumed suspicion at this point, I think he should have backed off a little bit because they are childhood friends, right? So he should have like been like, okay, wait a minute, maybe my criticism of her, my suspicion of her is a little unfounded because now it's a little more complicated since somebody matching her description has been notified or been noticed on another planet attempting another crime. So
Yes.
it's like, you should probably go a little bit more lenient on her now, which this feeds into another scene later on where he follows her later. I don't know why he's so suspicious of her even then, because now we know, like, it's very complicated. Yord is a very complicated
Yord
character.
is a very complicated guy. Yes. Speaking of that, seeing her on a different planet thing, I also continue to like how the writing of this show sets up a mystery and then systematically like removes obvious plot threads because we're at the beginning of episode 2. We already know that Osha is not the killer. So, because we now know that Osha is not the killer, the characters find this out very quickly. They do not drag out that element of the plot, other than with Yord. They don't drag out that element of the plot longer than they have to. There's immediately a thing that happens that exonerates Osha. So we know for a fact now, very shortly after the audience found out, we found out in the context of the story that Osha is not the murderer. So I did like that element of the show. I hate it when a show will say something like, "Oh, this person is not the murderer," and then people spend the entire movie being suspicious of them. When it's like, no, we the audience know. We know. You can have a couple of people be suspicious of them, but like we don't. Why? Anyway, that's something I really liked about this, adding this scene in here.
Section 3. On Olega, May meets with a man named Chimere in a shop. Chimere reveals that he's working with May by trying to blend in with the locals. He asks if she's succeeded in her mission, but May admits that she failed. She requests a poison, but Chimere hesitates, noting her dwindling options and warning that if she struggled with Torben, a Wookiee Jedi would be even tougher to challenge. May reveals that she has 2 Jedi left to kill, planning to eliminate one without a weapon to please the Master. Chimere completes the potion and hands it to May. Before leaving, she warns him not to let their conversation reach the Master, and Chimere agrees.
I love how colorful this show is. Like, in the visual design of the show, it's very bright.
Yes.
It's very colorful. It has a lot going on visually that's not brown, gray, or black. And I really appreciate that about it. It's visually interesting to look at.
Yeah, it's like coming off of Bad Batch where everything is very gray usually. Like
except when they're on Pabu, but yes.
Right. Yeah. But
well,
for the
I
most part,
I was more thinking something like The Mandalorian.
Or even Andor, really.
Or even Andor, which is
Andor's
very grounded.
very muted palette.
Yes. So I love that for this show, they went in the other direction and were like, this is going to be very bright and colorful. Not to talk too much about the trailer for Skeleton Crew, but the day we recorded this, a new trailer came out. I have the same thing about Skeleton Crew. I love how visually interesting it is. And Ahsoka. Ahsoka also was very colorful and very bright and very fun looking. And, you know, there's a place for the muted Andor color palette and there's a place for the bright Acolyte color palette. And I like that the Acolyte chose to go bright, especially tying it into the prequels. Anyway, let's talk about Chimere. Who's playing Chimere? I would love to know who's playing Chimere.
Chimere is played by Manny Jacinto. He is best known for his role on the NBC sitcom The Good Place. He's had a minor role in Top Gun Maverick, and he will be starring in the upcoming sequel to Freaky Friday titled Freakier Friday. So he just needs a Marvel thing, and he is got a trifecta, so I'm holding out hope that he's going to get that. Also, he's had 2 minor one-time appearances on 2 interesting shows that I feel like we mention very often. One of them being Supernatural.
For fuck's sake, he's on Supernatural?
He's on an episode of Supernatural.
He's on an episode of Supernatural? Which episode?
That I didn't look up, but...
Okay, so he's in one of the seasons that doesn't exist.
Oh, is it like current? Or the...
So the thing with Supernatural, right, is that they made 5 seasons of Supernatural. And then the entire world is trying to convince me that they made 10 more seasons after that. They did not. I don't believe them. I refuse to believe that they exist.
So what you're saying is he's in the latter half.
He is in season...
The lost
he
seasons.
is in, allegedly, if this season were to exist, he would be in season 8, which I've not seen because it's not real.
Okay, got it. On the other side of that coin of things that might not exist to you, he was also in an episode of Once Upon a Time.
Oh, yeah, I did not make it to his episode. I got about 3 or 4 episodes into season 2, and I went, I've seen enough of this show.
Yeah.
I'm going to check out now.
I think with Once, you got to get to at least through season 3, and then you're good. Like, I think if you can get through the third, like to the 3rd season, you're good. Because the 3rd season, I think, is the best season. That's the Neverland season. So that's like the really good season. But anyway, I could talk about Once Upon a Time and how terrible and awesome it is at the same time.
Okay, I'm never watching it.
I
I
know,
hope
but
you
like
understand that. I'm never watching it.
when I tell you though, it is the epitome of camp, but also actually like good storytelling. It's so hard to explain, like how it's simultaneously a good show and simultaneously a bad show at the same time. Like I love it so much.
Okay, well, I'm still watching season 4 of Elite. I'm back into it now, so that's what's currently eating up all my TV time.
Yeah, I think once you get to the episode or the thing that happened, the moment in season 6 that made me quit the show, you're gonna be like, I understand, and you're correct.
Listen, listen, I have a complicated relationship with Patrick. Like, I don't think he's a good person, but if anything happens to him in seasons 5 and 6, I will be extremely upset.
So sorry, we have to get back to this because we're clearly getting off topic with
We have
attractive
now
men.
tangented into speaking of very hot men,
There you go. Back to
very ridiculously, unbelievably, that is not fair that you are that good of an actor and also that talented and also that fucking hot.
mhm.
Manny Jacinto as
Yes.
Chimera in this scene.
Now, without getting too into it, why he's so hot. Interestingly enough, in this scene, he is very much this like subtle character. He's not very out there. He's very like clearly a drunk person.
Yes.
Like, somebody who is
He's
unreliable in this
playing
situation.
he's playing an archetype
Right.
in, I believe it's Japanese cinema, where you have the character who is like the wandering drunk, but then there's a back half of that. There's a twist to it. And I'm not going to say what the twist is, but if you've
Right.
watched the rest of The Acolyte, you know what the twist always is when you are presented a character in samurai media that's just like a ridiculously comic drunk sidekick. There's got to be a twist.
Yeah.
And the twist is going to be the same one that's in The Acolyte with regards to how competent he actually is. But I did love in this scene how well the character, I'm going to phrase this very carefully because it's going to have a double meaning, how well the character of the kind of useless drunk agent is being portrayed.
They do such a good job throughout this episode.
I feel like I'm nudging the audience.
I know. I feel like we have
has-
to nudge like
has
the whole
not
time.
has not which I can't imagine if you're listening to this episode you haven't watched the next episode, but I have gone through previous backlogs of podcasts before where they covered a TV show and I watched an episode of the show and then watched the episode of the podcast, so you never know.
Right. This is, he's a very interesting character. What's more interesting to me, though, is that he knows about May's overall purpose or plan, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of more of the mystery so far in the sense of a mystery show that we're talking about. We don't know why May's doing this, right? We know something happened. We haven't gotten to it yet, but we know something happened. She's getting revenge on these Jedi. Now we know how many Jedi she has to kill, who she's going after. There's all these we're learning all these parts of this plan. We're also learning that she has a master who
Yes. We learned
gave
that
her-
at the end of episode 1, but now we're getting much more clarity.
Right, because we saw him at the end of the last episode, but we didn't know what he was there for, why he was there, whatever. So clearly he is the one who trained her, right? She's also like got this plan. We don't know why she's killing these Jedi, but then we also know that she can't use a weapon, right? That's like kind of been her
One
thing.
of the Jedi she kills, she has to kill without the use of a weapon. And so
Right.
part of Chimera's point vis-a-vis the Wookiee Jedi is maybe you go after the youngest and most vulnerable of them and kill that one without a weapon,
Right.
which... Because it's clear that the other two Jedi are going to be Kalnaka and Sol. And it's clear that she wants to kill Sol without the weapon. She wants him to be the one that she kills without a weapon.
Yeah, it's some kind of ritualistic thing or some kind of like point that she's making by doing that.
Yeah, in order to like graduate to prove herself as the acolyte, she has to do this thing. I do love how Chimera is kind of trying to subtly teach May things when he gives this whole thing about, well, everyone has a weakness. You just have to find it. And I will say, when I watched this scene for the first time, I thought nothing of it. When I watched it for the second time, alarm bells started going off in my head when he started quoting the Sith code at her. He starts to say peace is a lie, and she cuts him off with the back half of it. And is like, that is literally the first line of the Sith code.
Right. And what's so interesting is like, okay, so their dynamic right here is he's helping her with her progress or whatever. He knows of the master and she knows he knows of the master. So I want to know what he is to her. Like, what does she think Chimere is? Like, is he just another student of the master, or is he just somebody who is just helping her because the master told him to? Because
It's
like
the
they,
second option.
okay.
We find that out in episode 4.
Oh, okay.
That
I
yeah,
know, but I'm saying
he's just
like
kind
in
of
this
helping her
moment.
out.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like for May, like I'm curious what her thought process is in this moment. It's just like he's just like this guy who's helping her, but he seems to know a lot about what she's trying to do, and it's like very interesting seeds that they're planting right now. But I just thought that was he's such a good character. Also, the I love the characterization of it's clear that he's about to make himself another alcoholic drink, but then it turns out he's actually making the potion the whole time. Like I love that flip of like, oh, he's really I'm not saying he's drunk, but like he's not that unassuming, right? Like she thinks, oh my God, he's about to make a fucking drink for himself. Like, and then he ends up making the poison, which is so that it's just such good characterization. Like,
I love his character. It is Indara might be my favorite, but I think Chimere might be like duking it out neck and neck with Vernestra for
I
number 2.
know. For me too. Like I think it's
I
like for
love
me,
him
yeah.
so much, and not just because I want to kiss Manny Jacinto on the mouth.
Yeah, I don't have any kind of alternate reason why I like this character.
He's an interesting character. He's set up in an interesting way. His relationship to May is very interesting, and he's played by one of the goddamn hottest men on the planet, who manages to play him as very not hot here.
Yes.
Which I know
Yeah.
that's Manny Jacinto under there, but the design of his character with regards to the hair and the
Yeah, the
way
greasy, sloppy kind of
the
look.
great
Yeah.
greasy sloppy kind of look, and then like just the way that Manny is playing him,
Yeah,
the
almost like hunched
choices.
over. Yeah.
Did you in your major have to take a bunch of acting classes?
No, I didn't.
In mine we did,
Okay.
because we basically, in my first major, the one I actually completed, we kind of double dipped in film and acting. So we took low and mid level theater classes, and we took low and mid level film classes, both. And the number one lesson that we were taught with regards to acting is about choices. It's about making 1,000 choices in a minute long period for what you're going to do as this character. Because every action is a choice, every facial expression is a choice, every word is a choice. So why is the character making them, and what choices would they make? The choices Manny Jacinto makes in this scene are incredible. Every subtle gesture he makes sells this image of this drunken kind of loser guy. I love him so much.
So good.
And that refers to both Chimere and Manny Jacinto.
I'm gonna bring it up later, but I want you to remember this moment. So Chimere, remember him and that he's a person.
I think about him daily. Yes.
Okay. I want to know, this is just food for thought for later. Is that his real name?
No.
Okay. Just that we're going to discuss it at another time, but I just want to bring up, is Chimere a real person? Is that a real name?
That is a good question.
So
if there is a Chimere that existed.
Correct. So just that's a plan, planting that seed now.
Okay.
I want to talk about it at another date and time, preferably the final episode, honestly.
Okay,
But,
we'll talk about it, but
yeah.
we need to stop talking about
I know.
Manny Jacinto now, otherwise we won't get to the point where we can really talk about him. Although I do want to say, I will note later that there's a particular scene where Amanda Stenberg's acting like shoots up to the next level with how talented they are. I do want to bring up that their chemistry as an actor with Manny Jacinto in both this scene and the later scene are incredible, in that the two of them are both able to play the same actors portraying interactions with two different people and still have some sort of chemistry, even though the chemistry feels different. So much as I am talking about how good Manny Jacinto is in this scene, Amanda Stenberg is also very good. It's just we've already talked about how good they are in a previous episode, but I'm bringing it up again now because they are the lead of the show for a reason.
Section 4. On the Jedi starship, Sol asks if Osha believes May was responsible for Master Indara's murder, despite having seen May seemingly perish. Osha says that it's the only explanation. Osha assures Sol that the tragedy on Brendok wasn't his fault, and he responds that he made peace with it. She admits to being a poor student, to which Sol humbly replies he might not have been a great teacher. Their conversation is interrupted when Yord announces over the intercom they're approaching Olega.
I only have two notes for this scene, and they kind of go hand in hand together.
Okay.
Right. So the first one is I wanted to draw attention to the line, "What happened that night wasn't your fault, Sol." We're just going to put a little pen in that.
Yep, put a pin in that one.
And we're going to come back to that one later. But I think the most telling exchange to me in this entire scene is the scene in which Osha says, "I wasn't a very good student," and Sol says, "Perhaps I wasn't a very good teacher." And I think this is interesting because with regards to all the failures of their previous interactions and coupled with the previous line in which Osha tells Sol that what happened on Brindok wasn't his fault, or she believes it wasn't his fault, neither one of them ever wants to think badly of the other one. Both of them would rather blame themselves for something than apply any sort of responsibility to the other party. And I think that's very unhealthy. I think that being able to take accountability for your role in something is as important as knowing how much accountability to place on the shoulders of someone else in the situation. And I think the Jedi tendency to be selfless is really becoming a problem here because it's a tenet that I think these two are very deeply misunderstanding.
Yeah, they don't. It's so complicated because it's hard to talk about without talking about the next episode. But it's like they both don't take any accountability whatsoever for any of their personal actions in what happens on Brendok. We don't, as of right now, we know nothing, right? We don't know what happened.
Well, Osha's a child, so
true.
She doesn't have to take anything for what happened on Brendok.
True. I won't give her as much grief as I'll give Sol because we'll find out soon.
Yeah, Sol is absolutely not taking responsibility for what happened on Brindok. And that is interesting because that is one of the only times he does deflect, where when she says it's not your fault, he basically already says, I know.
Yeah, I know, I made peace with it.
I don't know if he's saying that out loud or if it's, once again, Sol is a very Jedi, so he's able to take the religious tenets and bend them to justify how he already feels and what he already wants to do. And that is it is a thing that we see a lot in people in religious institutions, is oftentimes they will be able to bend their beliefs to justify what they were going to do.
Section 5. Outside the Jedi Temple, Master Sol informs the local Jedi that he's investigating the recent break-in that might connect to another case. Inside the temple, May approaches the meditating Master Torben again, except this time with a vial of poison. She hints at his past guilt, and he breaks his meditation in a final act of remorse and drinks the poison. Osha separates from the group, with Yord quietly following behind her. She finds Torben's dead body, and the rest of the group enter the chamber and confront Osha, thinking her to be the killer after all. Yord defends her, confirming that he followed her and found Torben already dead when they arrived. Thankful, Osha identifies the poison as Bunta, a substance from her home world on Brendok.
I love how the Jedi in the High Republic era are allowed to have more than one set of clothing. Because if you notice, they have the temple robes, which are white and gold.
Sure.
And then they have their what's called a mission robe, which is brown and gold.
So they're only allowed to have 2 pairs of clothing.
They have more than that. And we will actually see Vernestra in another set of clothing at the end of the show.
I'm gonna say maybe there's nighttime clothing. There's bed, like they have like pajamas.
Right. Well, so I think it's interesting that we see that because a lot of times Jedi in prequel media are portrayed as wearing the same type of clothing over and over and over again. It's always the brown robes. It's always the brown robes all the time. And it's generally the same brown robes every time we see them. And part of this is because when we look at something like the Clone Wars, obviously it makes more sense if you only need to use the character model that you made. If you don't need to make a totally different one in temple robes that are different. But I like that we're visually seeing on screen the Jedi wearing different types of robes depending on the situation. So we find out in the scene where the Jedi are talking to that guy at the gate, who again, we cannot possibly cover every single actor in the show, I am sorry. They are talking to the guy at the gate, and the guy mentions that Torben hasn't spoken to anyone because he's taken the Barash vow.
Interesting. What is the
Bradley,
Barash vow?
well, Bradley, you should know because it's not the first time you personally have run across the Barash vow.
That's right. I think we read a very particular comic book that
Hmm.
mentioned it, no?
We read the comic that invented it.
Oh. Remind our viewers what
I
that
would
comic.
love to remind our viewers, if only because I think that the episodes that we did on that are some of my favorites of the show. The Barash vow, which is a vow to cut oneself off from all of the affairs of the Jedi and seek meditation in the Force for a very, very intense wrongdoing. That you have done something that you need to seek guidance from the Force, possibly for the rest of your life, if you do not get the answers that you're looking for. That vow was originally in the Darth Vader comics by Charles Soule, and it has come up again in the High Republic Publishing Initiative. A character in a book that I won't say, but one of the Phase 1 Wave 1 books takes the Barash vow. And then in Phase 2, this is only a minor spoiler, we meet the Barash of the Barash vow. So the Barash vow is not that old at this point. It's only about a century old, century and a half old. Actually, no, it's 2.5 centuries old. I can't get into why I was weird with the dates there, but yes, so the Barash vow, big thing in Star Wars publishing recently. First time we're seeing it on screen, though. And it's a little weird that he's like in a Jedi temple doing it, but you know what? Okay, whatever, we'll take it. So I love how Jecki just like bends down and you think she's about to like do this really comforting, like, it's okay, small street child, tell us what happened. And then she just starts interrogating this kid. Like she just starts brutally like, did you open the temple door? Who paid you to do it?
Right.
Where do they go? What do they look like?
Assume
I'm
guilt
like,
first and then
oh yeah, she's like interrogating the kid across the police table.
I love it.
Like Jecki is doing no favors for the argument that the Jedi are just cops, which they are not. But she's not doing them any favors
Yeah, because
in
they
that
haven't given
argument.
us a reason so far that the Jedi are nothing but cops at this point. Like so far, like everything, all the action they've taken are just purely like that's
Whether
all
or
they're
not the
doing.
Jedi, yeah, and whether or not the Jedi are tools of the state, primarily, or whether or not being tools of the state has led them to stray from their mission, is a central theme of the prequels era, and one this show was starting to try to dip its feet into, particularly in the finale. But on the surface, it's very easy to look at them as tools of state power because of the way Jecki acts.
Right.
Jecki's not as subtle as the others. So Jecki's going to be going in with this stuff, which I like a lot. And I also thought it was really funny. Once again, shout out to the music. It rules. I do want to talk about the Torben death scene and just particularly bring up the line where he says, "We thought we were doing the right thing." Did you, Torben? Did you specifically think you were doing the right thing?
Yeah, this is gonna get really complicated later once we find out the actual Jedi side of the
He
things.
says this.
Yeah,
I don't know if he believes it.
I think this is so complicated, right? Because in this moment, I can only talk about this moment, but in this moment, she taunts him by telling him all this stuff, like, everything's your fault kind of thing, And then she's like, if you really want my forgiveness of the things that you quote unquote did to me, again, we don't know what they are. She says, you'll drink this poison and kill yourself. Like that's pretty much the only thing she's like, the only way I'm going to forgive you is if you do it yourself. That's pretty fucked up, honestly, but I kind
Yep.
of love it.
And it's fucked up that he does it.
That's even worse. That's what's even crazier. Like he's that
Because
fucking guilty.
we will also see, and again, it's going to get complicated. Preview for episode 7, I'm going to defend Torben. I think he made probably one of the bigger mistakes. But the reason he did it is extremely muddled, and it's not entirely his fault. But he must have convinced himself that it was, or convinced himself that, like, he thought he was doing the right thing. I don't know. I feel like I can't really talk about this moment without deep diving into all of episode 7.
Yeah, it's getting interesting because also what the purpose of this Barash vow is, like you said, was like kind of more like an inner peace, right? Like a separating yourself from physical plane to kind of literally seek inner peace of some kind.
Well, and it's also removing oneself from the politics of the Jedi and the
Right.
responsibilities of the Jedi and removing oneself from the ebb and flow of the galaxy in order to simply be one with the Force.
Which is interesting that he did this. Apparently, he's been doing this for years. He's been sitting there just kind of absorbing the force. Like I don't even know what you call it. Like I don't know how is he eating? How is
He
he
hasn't like
surviving?
spoken to anybody yet.
Yeah.
It's
Or does he come out of it to use the restroom? Like I don't really understand
we're
what
not
the
supposed
like
to think about it that much. I mean, I appreciate that you do because you have been talking to me on this podcast for years and years and years now.
right.
But I don't know. I don't know. There are some inconsistencies with the Barash vows. We have seen it elsewhere in the Barash vows portrayed here. However, those inconsistencies are not big enough for me to dismiss it. So I fully believe that somebody could theoretically remain in a forced state for however long that they needed. But I'm sure he has to come down to eat and take care of basic biological functions. He's in a room like by himself.
Yeah.
So like probably he does this when no one else is around.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking maybe he just like he only meditates like on his off time, right? Like I think he still goes around, he eats and
Oh,
whatever.
he
He
hasn't
doesn't
yeah, he
talk to
hasn't
anybody.
spoken to anybody. Okay, that's
Right.
the best explanation of it that I've heard.
I think so,
That he
yeah.
doesn't talk to anybody, but all he does is eat and
And meditate all day.
meditate and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yep. And then he goes to bed and then he wakes up and does it all over again. Like, yeah, it's definitely a routine. I don't think that he's
Yes.
just sitting there floating for 20 years. Like, I don't think that's sustainable.
No, and he is
Also,
he is
yeah,
a master. He is called Master Torben.
right,
So it says what he hasn't talked to anybody in what 10 years.
right. So he had to have gone through some kind of
He had to
thing where
finish the
he,
trials and become
right,
a master, and
right.
they
And
in a
then
very
do
short
this.
amount of time.
Yeah. So I don't know the timeline. I'm sure there's going to be some kind of comic or novel or something explaining all
They'll
this,
explain it somewhere.
but I also, this kind of goes back to the makeup thing. I kind of wish what they would have done here, instead of doing the bad hairline, I think what they could have done for him was, I know this might be a trope or something like in other religions or something, but like how people they like to shave their head a lot. I think it's in Avatar, The Last Airbender, where the monks shave their heads, like to kind of like,
Yeah, it
you
it
know,
it goes back to
create
Buddhist
clarity.
monks.
Right.
Buddhist monks are probably the best real life example of a religion that does this, but yes, it is a actually decently common. Yeah, that would have been good.
I think that would
Actually,
have been a better choice.
if he had
Hmm.
shaved his entire head,
Yep. Because
that would
then
have
the
that would
old
have
man
given him
makeup
more
wouldn't
of
be
a
that weird.
monk. Yeah, I like that a lot actually.
I know. Okay, so my Photoshop challenge for this show for people out there, which I
Someone
tend to do this
Photoshop
randomly.
someone
Photoshop him.
Photoshop bald Torben and then
Yes,
tag
please.
us in
Tag us
something.
and let me know what that looks like. I just have a feeling, I have a weird feeling that that would drastically improve the old man Master Torben look. I think that's a way better choice, honestly, because something about his widow's peak hairline thing I don't love. Like I don't like this mullet weird
Chris,
thing.
I can hear you. I can hear you bringing up my forehead. We're not going to get into that right now. My last note for this sequence is your being suspicious of Osha is actually being the thing that clears her in this particular murder.
Right.
Because you can make the argument that she was not the person who broke in, but she was standing over the body. And they managed to avoid a lot of bureaucratic nightmare just by Yord being suspicious of her in the first place. I also love the journey of Yord and Osha's like rekindling friendship throughout this series, which it will span the entire length of, definitely. Nothing
Yeah.
bad will happen.
No, I do love that he like defends her in that moment and then she's like, "Oh, wait a minute. There is still something here. Like you still might be my friend slightly. Like it's going to take some time, but I can see the seeds of you're defending me. Like
I think
you know.
Yeah, I think it was less that like Yord had to prove her innocence and more that Yord had to prove her innocence to himself.
Right, exactly. Which is good for him because he needs that. I think he is a little serious a lot of the time and he does need to kind of like However, I am going to defend him slightly for still being suspicious of her because even though he clears her of this quote unquote murder, even though it's technically a suicide, he is still not clearing her of the previous murder because technically, if we look at this like as a practical thing, technically she's still not cleared of the other murders. If the person matching her description did do that murder, and then now we just have a random ass murder suicide that she may or may not be involved in. Well, clearly she's not because we just proved that she wasn't. But it's like, I don't know. It's hard to like
Well, that's
fully
the
clear her of
impetus.
everything.
It's the impetus to get May, right? Because once
Right.
they have May, it's and visible proof that May is alive, and at the end of this episode they will confront her, and we'll see how Vernestra's tone kind of changes once there's actual visual confirmation that May is alive. That basically completely clears Osha, and we will also see Osha's given much more freedom in episodes 4 and 5 because of the ending of this episode right here.
Section 6. The Jedi set up a surveillance on Chimere's apothecary shop. Disguised as May, Osha enters Chimere's shop, and Chimere asks if the potion worked. Suspicious, Chimere comments on her uncanny resemblance to May. The Jedi enter, surrounding him. Sol offers leniency if he cooperates with the investigation, and he claims ignorance about May's master, but reveals May seeks revenge on 4 Jedi.
So, as we first see Chimere walking up, we see him eating a blue cookie. Take note of that cookie. We will see that cookie again.
Okay.
I absolutely love the scene where they are discussing the plan and arguing over which plan to do because it's just so funny. It's a funny scene. And also, Jackie and Yord just play off each other so well.
So, well, I just, like, without getting into future episodes, I really wanted to see more of just them together. I think that's actually a failure of the show is that we didn't get more Jackie and Yord together.
I'm fond of saying that I think the show should have either been 6 episodes or 10. That 8 was a bad number for it. I think that if they had shaved a little bit off of the story and they had condensed it down a little bit down into maybe 6 episodes versus, maybe add a little bit and then kind of bring down the production a little bit, similar to what The Mandalorian does, and you kind of structured it that way and you'd kind of done it that way, then you could have stretched out the story a little bit to allow for more of those character interactions. And I do agree with you. I think more Jackie and Yord would have been something that definitely could have been added in there just for flavor for these two characters.
I agree. And I understand this is not what we would consider an ensemble show, right? Because normally in traditional television, ensemble would mean like each character gets full storylines, right? Like they get full
Vox Machina. An ensemble show
exactly.
is Vox Machina.
There you go. That's
where every character in the main ensemble gets their own, like they get equal weight in terms of the plot.
Exactly. And unfortunately, Yord and Jackie are just supporting characters in this show. And it is a shame because I think they're some of the more interesting characters, even though they're only supporting, which is that's further like that's actually really good on the actors. First of all, if you can make your character even just be like just a side character be so important or stand out to fans and people like that those characters more so sometimes more than the main characters, that's usually like a great sign of a good actor. Like, so congratulations to those two because I think that they are the more interesting characters.
All the side characters in this are really fun and memorable, and they also like clearly have lives outside of the main characters and relationships with each other that don't have to do with the main characters, which is also very nice and a sign of good writing and good acting. That Jackie, Yord, other characters that are involved. I want to talk about Chimere, but I really can't right now. As far as being characters who are outside of Osha, May, and Sol, who are kind of the main characters of this show. Speaking of Chimere, you can see the exact moment he gets close enough to Osha to discover that it's not May. Like, you can literally watch this on Manny Jacinto's face. And I do stare very hard at Manny Jacinto's face when he's on screen. But I for that reason, I noticed you can tell. You can tell when he figures it out. And that's when he gets close to her right before he says the line.
And that line, first of all, is both like super mysterious and dark, like when he says it, but he's also kind of like sensual, like when he says it. Like,
so This whole scene is like plays out like a meet cute, like the
Yes.
beginning of a romance story.
This is Chimere meeting Osha for the first time and being like infatuated with her. Like he's like, whoa, like you are the same but different. Like something about her intrigues him so much. He's just like, you're May, but you look just like her, but you're not. Like I can sense it in you that you're
You
not.
can
Like,
tell his whole body like
yeah,
changes when he realizes it isn't May.
yeah. Oh,
And yep, they have their little fun little awkward moment at the beginning, but then he turns like real sexy real fast, and I'm like,
yeah, he plays it
interesting.
so differently once he realizes because, and then he tells her exactly what she wants to hear, which is also very interesting as well because he's playing it like Chimera is like such a complicated character, right? Because like he's playing it as kind of the dumb apothecary person, right? In the beginning, because that's his kind of almost cover, right? But then once he realizes who Osha is, he kind of gives her all the information she actually wanted to know anyway. He's purposefully doing this. Like it's very clear that he is giving them the information that they are searching for this whole time, which is like what May's doing or whatever. Like he's just giving away the information on purpose. Like I know he's doing it on purpose. There's just something about him is very intentional.
I actually have a different read on the scene. I think he didn't mean for the Jedi to figure out that there was a master behind all of this.
Okay.
And this was a criticism of the show at the time. For the entire run of the show, there was a criticism of the show in bad faith. I do not think this was a good criticism. I think it was a bad criticism, but that the Jedi aren't supposed to know about the Sith. Spoilers, the Sith are kind of the ones behind this. The minute that they find out that there's an unseen master pulling the strings behind all of this was the minute I started to get real fucking concerned. Because I saw a bunch of people without plot armor finding out that there's a potential mystery here. And
Okay.
alarm bells went off in my head. Now, a lot of people were like, oh, that breaks canon because they're not supposed to know. And I'm like,
Mm,
maybe we keep watching the show and something
yeah.
might happen to tell us why the Jedi don't know. But also in The Phantom Menace, they clearly know about how the rule of two operates. So, like, how did
Yeah.
Yoda find that out?
Yeah, because I don't
Hmm?
agree with the whole they don't know about Sith. I don't buy that because I don't think that's like I feel
They
like
only find out, well, they know that, like, how the Sith work. They think they're. And this is another thing, we'll get into it in a later scene, that Ki-Adi-Mundi in The Phantom Menace saying that the Sith have been extinct could mean any number of things.
right.
Like it could mean he genuinely thinks they're extinct and other people disagree with him. It could be that only Yoda knows that they're still around. It could be that as soon as they saw Darth Maul, Yoda went off and Google searched.
What is
What
a
are
Sith?
Sith? What is a Sith?
Why do they have red blade?
But also consider this. It is entirely possible that Yoda knew that the rule of two was a thing and either thought the Sith were extinct himself, that thought they had been wiped out, at some point in the past, or because this is a thing the Sith has done. If we go all the way back to the Darth Bane trilogy of books, part of the plot of those books is concerned with Bane and Zana convincing the Jedi that the Sith are extinct, even though a bunch of Jedi find out they're still around, systematically killing them, discrediting them, or driving them insane. So it's also possible Yoda knew this information might be out there and just like didn't tell anybody. There's a number of reasons. But I started to return to my original point. I started getting concerned when this group directly found out that somebody was pulling the strings. I went, oh, I would be surprised if any of these people survived the show.
Interesting.
Yes, because I was very worried about this. Speaking of the Jedi breaking in and interrogating Chimere, I just want to point out that none of them sense anything weird about him.
I noticed that too. So as far as I'm concerned, I shouldn't sense anything weird about him either, right?
Nope, perfectly normal dude, because if something were up with him, the Jedi would surely sense it,
They
right?
would immediately know.
Definitely, if something was up with someone, the Jedi would sense it if they were in the room with them. Anyway, I'm just thinking for no particular reason at all about the multiple meetings that the Jedi Council has with Supreme Chancellor Sheev Palpatine in his office.
Mhm.
Or the times that Supreme Chancellor Sheev Palpatine visits the Jedi Temple and walks around. For no particular reason, I'm bringing this up. Anyway, Chimera also asked the Jedi to please not do the memory wipe thing, which is a sick KOTOR reference.
Okay. I didn't know what that was. I thought he was just doing something that was like maybe a rumor about the
Are you
Jedi or something.
familiar with the plot of Knights of the Old Republic?
No.
Okay. I'm going to desperately avoid spoiling the plot, but a large part of the plot of that game revolves around the fact that if Jedi want to, they can wipe your memory.
Interesting. So that's kind of bringing that into the canon, I guess.
Yes, I believe this is our first reference.
Okay. Well, I would say it only brings it into canon if someone actually does the thing, right? He's referencing
He's
that
referencing that
being a
they can
thing,
do it. Well,
right?
I would argue that he is referencing. You could make the case that he's referencing a rumor that
Right,
we've
which is
never
what
actually seen them
I'm
do it.
taking this as, yeah.
I take it as it is a thing that has happened. Now, even in Legends, it was only in very rare cases. There had to be a really good argument for why you should wipe someone's mind because it's incredibly unethical and it can go very badly
Sure.
if you fuck it up. But it is a Knights of the Old Republic reference, and that is cool. There are a lot of Legends references in this show. We got a Knights of the Old Republic reference last episode with the Selkath.
Section 7. Later that night, Sol waits in an alley with Osha. Osha expresses her desire to confront May, but Sol insists on handling it alone. She then reveals that May's targets are 4 Jedi from the Brendok incident: Indara, Torben, Kelnaka, and Sol himself. Sol urges Osha to have faith in him and in May. When Yord spots May, he alerts the others. Sol confronts her outside Chimera's shop, and she then attacks him unarmed. Sol fends her off, questioning her unusual tactics. Eventually, he disarms her, demanding to know her master's identity. May resists, but Sol senses her feelings for her sister, revealing that Osha is alive. As May attempts to escape, using sand as a cover, in the chaos, May steals a speeder, but Osha intercepts her, gun drawn. Shocked to see her sister alive, she escapes just as the other Jedi arrive.
I want to highlight one exchange from the interaction between Osha and Sol, and that is when Osha says, I deserve justice, and Sol says, you want revenge. Osha badly wants to blame someone for what happened to her family. She badly wants, and this I think is the reason she had to stop being a Jedi. She couldn't let go of this. This specifically is the thing she was not able to let go of. She cannot forgive what happened to her family on Brendok. She believes Sol is not responsible. She believes May is the one who did it. And we see this with regards to how she interacts with May in this sequence. Because May is like, skipping ahead, May is like shocked to see that Osha's alive and like almost kind of relieved. And Osha tries to shoot her.
Well, she shoots her in a way that's like she obviously misses. It's kind of one of those things where like she attempts to do it, like she has
can't bring herself
she
to,
can't bring
yeah.
herself to do it, so she kind of purposefully misses, right? I mean, well, I don't know if she subconsciously misses or if she's genuinely like, I'm moving it to the side and shooting away to like kind of break her concentration. But I think she does it. I'm leaning more towards she does it more subconsciously. She's like, I can't bring myself to do it because she wasn't prepared to even see her face to face, really. So it was kind of, even though she wanted to confront her, she kind of couldn't prepare for the moment, even though she was seeking out that moment anyway. So she didn't know how she was going to react in the moment, but that's skipping ahead to that. But anyway, yeah, also May thinks that Osha's dead.
Yep.
That's an interesting plot point too.
Mm-hmm. Both of them have thought the other one is dead.
Was dead. Interesting. And we'll find out
more about that
episode,
later,
hopefully. But yeah, I just find that very interesting point that, I mean, it's obvious that Osha, for reasons we'll find out later, that Osha thinks that May is dead. But May thinking that Osha is dead, I don't know if there's a lot of foundation there necessarily. That's where I'm kind of like disconnecting. Why Osha or why May thinks that Osha's dead.
I think
don't understand
there is a gap in May's story that I don't think is really adequately explained. And you know, maybe this was something they had been saving for later storytelling. That what actually happened between the events on Brendok and May getting wrapped up with Darth Teeth. Because that's a big question that I still have about May's character journey. And one theory at the time, and it's not a theory that can be disproven, right? It's still a theory, is that Darth Teeth was there on Brendok when all this shit went down. And Darth Teeth kind of swept May up. So that is a theory as to what happened to her in between, that she was taken in and she was brought up by Darth Teeth as his acolyte.
Hopefully we'll find out more soon. I just find it interesting. Like, you're right, that is a gap in the story.
That
We
is a
don't
gap.
know
that
how
will
she gets
persist.
to this point. Yeah, interesting.
This fight between Soul and May, the fight is awesome, but I do want to take note of the fact that Soul almost exclusively fights defensively,
Yes.
which we also saw Indara do in the bar, fight almost entirely defensively. I just think that's a neat choice for the Jedi.
Well, it goes back to Indara's point of, I don't fight unarmed people, right? Or what her I guess the theory of the Jedi is that you don't fight unarmed people with your lightsaber, basically.
The Force is used for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Right, exactly.
Is what Yoda says. And that is something too. Every time that the Soul or Indara act aggressively in their scenes, it is with the intent to disarm and disable May. It is never with the intent to kill her or injure her.
He even gets her little knives at one point because he's fighting her, and then he kind of like spins her around in some kind of way where he like grabs her weapons so that she doesn't have any more. And he just he's like interesting and drops them. Like this is such a good fight.
It's such a great fight. I also love the part where he like gets her like she's like hovering off the ground and he like reads her mind.
She falls back on the ground. She's hovering with the Force. He's holding her up. But then you're right. He kind of probes her a little bit. Like he mind probes her. Like, and he's like, why are you doing this? Like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And she's like, get out of my head.
Yep. Because the whole invasion of the privacy of thoughts thing is a big question with regards to the Jedi.
He also reveals something interesting from the Force probe, which is that she doesn't even know the identity of her master.
Yes. That she doesn't know who her master is.
No idea who the master is either, which interesting is, I know it leads into the actual mystery of everything, but it's also kind of like, why has the master taken these great pains to hide their identity from May?
We know it's a man because they refer to him as a he, but we don't know anything else about him at this point. But yes, he is also taking great pains because that is a thing with the Sith. Is you're going to take great pains to hide your identity as a Sith. Very few people are going to know that you are. I think Darth Plagueis, maybe only Sheev and one droid knew, or Palpatine rather, and one droid knew because he's not Sheev in Legends. But in the original novel, Darth Plagueis, I don't think a lot of people knew that Higo Damask was Darth Plagueis. Not that I'm bringing up Plagueis for any particular reason.
Right. That's not going to be relevant later. But
it's not going to be relevant later, but I just want to say very few people knew. And I think as far as Palpatine goes, Masameda knew, Sly Moore knew, I think. And those may be some of the only people who knew his identity other than his apprentices.
We already covered Osha and May confronting each other, so I don't really have anything on that. But I did want to bring up the May using the sand to flee. It just gets everywhere. It's coarse.
Yes, it is very irritating and gets everywhere. Yeah, my only remaining note for that sequence is I just want to continue to highlight how good of an actor Amanda Stenberg is.
Yeah, I thought it was so good.
So good. Take us home, Bradley, or rather take us to Kofar.
Section 8. After the failed attempt to capture May, Master Soul contacts Vernestra for an update. She has gathered the Jedi Council to discuss the threat posed by May, an outsider with Force training. Soul tells her that they know May's next destination, but she requests Soul to return to Coruscant. The next day, May confronts Kymir for betraying her to the Jedi. Kymir offers to help by smuggling them out of the city to Kofar, where the Wookiee Jedi Kelnaka resides. On Kofar, two scavengers discover what they seem to be a crashed ship and plan to salvage its hyperdrive. They are stopped by Kelnaka, a Wookiee Jedi. The frightened scavengers flee.
I just want to point out the interesting way this show portrays Vernestra in these early episodes, where because we are conditioned to view Soul as the protagonist of his own story and Vernestra as sort of a attempt to moderate him, but we are conditioned by writing tools to be on his side, that she comes off as somebody who is actively impeding him. When in reality, if you listen to the words she says, she's almost always right. Like what she says here is, don't go running off after May. There is a much bigger situation. We need to have a conference about it before we can do anything else.
Right,
the situation has massively changed. We don't know if we're going to send more Jedi with you. We don't know what the implications of what you learned about this mysterious master are. So she's right. She's right in this scene. She is correct to be like, no, do not run off.
Yeah, don't go there. Like, we
Do
need
not
you to
run off.
regroup.
We need to determine if we're sending backup with you. Like the mission parameters are changed. This is no longer one person is killing Jedi. There's
Yeah.
a much bigger thing here. So I think she's right in this scene. And I think it's interesting how storytelling conventions lead us to disagree with her at first. But if you actually listen to what she says, she's taking the reasonable course of action.
Right. And they're doing this in a way though that makes us, because we know from previous movies and stuff, right? Every single time they've always been like, "Oh, well, the Jedi Council needs to discuss this." And then the character who is being impeded by their discussion is always like, "Well, I'm just gonna go do the thing that I want to do,"
And
i.e.,
then they're
usually
right to do it.
Anakin or whatever.
Yeah. And then they're proven correct by the
Right.
narrative.
Yes. So you're right. We are conditioned to think like, oh, the Jedi Council are going to talk about it. So clearly they're just wasting time. Like the main characters should just go fuck off and do whatever they want because they're going to actually be right in the end and justified in their actions. But clearly we're going to find out that that might not be the case. So yeah, it's very interesting. I love when they do that, but I do like that Vernestra is correct in this moment.
The planet of Kofar is new for the Acolyte. We have
Okay.
not seen it before. We also get our first look at Kelnaka the Wookiee Jedi. But before we do that, I do want to just mention offhand, how weird it is that Chimere just sort of happens to know where Kelnaka is. He just sort of
Right.
found this out in the 12 hours between being interrogated and May confronting him at the gate.
Not suspicious or weird at
Not
all.
suspicious. Anyway, Wookiee Jedi. We love those. We have had a handful of Wookiee Jedi at this point. Lo Baka, I think, was the one from Legends. And then we've had a few in the High Republic, most notably Buryaga, who is fucking everywhere in the High Republic, and also Arkoff, the Wookiee Arkoff. So Kelnaka, not our first Wookiee Jedi, or even our first High Republic Jedi. Also Gunji, Wookiee
Yeah,
Jedi.
Gundy's been our most recent one, at least in
Gunji's been our
Bad Batch era.
Yeah, we've
So,
seen them in animation before because Gunji was all the way back in the Clone Wars.
that's right. I have one small problem with the
Okay.
structure of this episode.
Okay.
Do we need this Kalnaka scene at the end?
I think yes, because it's a tease to hold us over till episode 4. Because what's going to happen is episode 3 is going to take us into a completely different plot.
Yeah.
And we kind of need that little tease at the end, I think, to be like, Wookiee Jedi. That's cool. That's a great way to end the episode.
I go back and forth because on the one hand, I agree with you, and I think it ends the episode like where it needs to end. However, I also kind of like go like, well, it works better, I think, as a opener to next week. Like I just like the idea that did you
Well, 2
just
weeks
put
from
this
now.
scene as the opening, tease to the episode. I also But on the one hand, if you take this out, my problem is the Chimera scene with May, I don't think is a good ending. I don't
No.
think it's like a solid enough like punch to the end. Like, whereas obviously a Wookiee Jedi showing up is. I'm conflicted because I don't know how to improve it in a way that satisfies me because on the one hand, I don't want it here, but on the other hand, you have to have it here. So it's kind of like, I kind of
Yeah,
can't
and
decide.
I think broadly this episode was very well structured. I think it was
Yeah.
structured like a TV show. It has a self-contained plot. It has an A plot with the murder of Torben and tracking down May, and then it has kind of a B plot with introducing Chimere, and it has a C plot with Yord and Osho and their the changing nature of their relationship. So I think it's one of the best structured episodes that they've done. Yeah, I do think that Kelnaka scene does need to be there.
I do because I just realized that episode 3 is Destiny and it's not related to
I was gonna
Go
say,
Far
yeah, that was
So-
my original point, was that we
Yeah.
do a completely different plot, so we kind of need that tease.
Yeah, you're right. So okay, I'll keep it in because you're right. It would be confusing to not have it in here because then we will forget about the fact that the Wookiee Jedi is even a thing that we need to remember for the 4th episode, because of the way that they do the 3rd episode. So would you like to know who directed and wrote this episode?
I would love to know who directed and wrote this episode.
So this episode was again directed by Leslie Headland. However, she did not write this episode. This episode
Who
has
wrote
different
this
writers.
episode?
This was written by Jason Micallef and Charmaine DeGrate.
Do you have any additional information on them? Because I do have them pulled up here.
Oh, well, let us know. I don't have anything.
So Jason is both a writer and producer, has served both as a writer and producer for The Acolyte. He's an executive producer, credited as an executive producer, as well as the writer of 2 of the episodes. This is not the last time we will see him. Notably, he is an executive producer, the creator of, and one of the writers of the god-awful Heathers reboot.
Ah, so there's another Heather's connection right there.
There's a Heathers connection. Charmaine, looking at what she has written, notably has been a writer for an episode of Daisy Jones and the Six, as well as something we recognize, Bradley. She's co-executive producer and a writer for House of the Dragon. She wrote season 1, episode 5, the wedding episode.
Okay, so there's the House of the Dragon connection. Okay,
yes,
interesting.
We brought up House of the Dragon before.
I like it.
So those are who the writers of this episode are. Not written a lot. Both of them seem to be kind of new to the industry, as far as I can tell. Charmaine, in particular, writing and producing credits only go back to 2019.
There you go.
But that's who's writing this episode. Bradley, do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
My final thoughts are I agree with you. I think this is a pretty self-contained episode. I think it's a good ending to what I would consider the 2-part premiere, which they dropped both these episodes on the same day when the episode premiered. So it's I think they go well. They're good supporting episodes for each other. I do think it was smart of them to do a 2-episode premiere in this instance. I think, again, I'm still pushing back on the naming convention. However, I agree with you. They make sense for what we've seen so far in the show. The naming conventions work properly. I liked it. I don't know. I thought it was good. I thought that the May storyline throughout the 2 episodes was good. I thought the OSHA thing, and it's all kind of like, we're done now. Like, we don't need to worry about we don't need to worry about OSHA being like a suspect anymore, like as much anymore, right? Like, that plot line is done. We don't have to like harp over the fact that, oh my God, she's still killing people somehow, and we don't know how she's doing it, but even though she's in our custody, she's still killing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they've gotten past that point of we don't need to know, because now that May has been revealed to Soul, at least officially, that she's alive, we don't have to worry about OSHA being a suspect or how she's like, and she can be on their team now and helping get May right. They're setting up clearly. So I liked it. I thought it was good. I liked all the characters. I think everybody had their moments and their time to shine so far. Introduction of Chimere is a great point in the story. Clearly he is important in some way. We just don't know how he's important, but we're going to find out hopefully.
My final thoughts in the episode are it was good, it was well structured, it was well acted. I liked it a lot. Mandy Jacinto, if you are free, I am free. At any point, I can make that work. And I think that these 2 episode arcs were very good, little arc of their own. We've eliminated, as you said, and I agree with it, a lot of the obvious plots where they could go with the show. We've closed a lot of the doors that were very open. And so going forward, it's interesting to see how they proceed with the mystery elements of the show, having eliminated a lot of the obvious mystery paths that they could potentially take. So next week, we're covering The Acolyte, episode 3, which is called something. Destiny. Okay. We're going to cover episode 3, and we're going to talk about it in great detail. But for now, let's do our pluggables. Bradley does a bunch of reality TV show when he is working, which he is not right now, which is how we can have 2-hour episodes on The Acolyte. He has done such shows as Married to Medicine, Queen's Court, Temptation Island, and most recently The Circle, seasons 6 and 7, which are now available on Netflix. I am on a TTRPG High Republic podcast called For Light and Dice. Bradley is also on the High Republic TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice as the voice of one of the series villains, which is a lot of fun. If you want to read me do a twist on a murder mystery, I also write gay mystery books, which you can find on Kindle Unlimited. They are called Beach House Studios. They are a thriller mystery series that is set in a porn studio. So you can find that on Amazon Kindle Unlimited. Currently, I am looking at exploring other options. And that's it. Bradley, we have gone through all of our pluggables, which means it is time for you to run the socials so I can get back to playing Dragon Age the Veilguard, where I'm gonna fuck that old man. Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com to let us know. You can also find us on Twitter at Gold Squad Gaze, and you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Gold Squadron Gaze. You can also find us on YouTube at our Gold Squadron Gaze YouTube channel, where we post full episodes of this show. Finally, if you liked the show, don't forget to rate us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That allows other people to find our show. As always, thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze, and we'll see you next week. So I probably should stay around there. I don't know. I'm looking at this like waveform trying to be like, where do I position my head in reference to this new cylindrical object in front of me? So I'm just saying now it's the new podcast mic. I'm talking about the new podcast mic.